Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Vern Beckman, and I've got a very special friend in Marcellus, Michigan, that he just turned 85 in August. I'm going to talk to you about him, and this relates to what Jen had put together as far as a dance hall is like a small church. This is where a town of Marcellus with 1,100 people come together and kind of adopted this Jimmy Shannon for their town, and they take care of him and all that. This Blake is John Mooey, and he wrote a book, Once Upon a Small Town. It takes a lot of the things that happened to Jimmy and stuff as he grew up. And he was adopted when he was 2 years old. There was an orphan train that had come through Marcellus, heading up to Kalamazoo and Grand Rapids area, and maybe he came off of the orphan train. His mother, May, adopted him and took him home, and then the doctors thought that he should go to a mental institution because he was mentally challenged. She took him there, and months of trying to be treating him and stuff, he would just sit in a corner and stare out the windows. So she took him home and says, I'll teach you how to be kind to people and do some of the things that you need to do, like feed the chickens, raise crops, and, a garden and stuff. So he done that and kept going to town and selling his eggs and stuff, and people knew him all the time, from him and his ma coming into town. It started out about how he done things and that he was always riding his bike through town. So this teacher, the English teacher, wanted to have the people do stories and report things. So Blake chose Jimmy and had to go to all these different people to get notes and stuff of what he does. And he goes to different places like the restaurant, the Cozy Cup. Actually, they feed him quite a bit there for little or nothing, or people come in and buy his meals for him sometimes. But now he makes enough on Social Security that he takes care of himself. When he got old enough, he'd always go to the baseball games and the football games and was one of their biggest fans. And the coaches ended up having him sit on the bench with them because he was one of their super fans. And even though he couldn't talk much or anything, they always had him on the bench to get the kids to go, and they treated him just like a member of the community. Well, Jimmy was the super fan, and the student council bought him a varsity jacket that says super fan on it. And he wore that to all the games and different things. And there was other things that the community had done there. At one time, they gave him a plaque that had super fan, and they were playing Constantine at the time. And so they presented that to him at halftime at the basketball game. The whole town just about showed up for this basketball game. So he raised up the plaque and walked it all down along the fan base, and then he turned around and walked on the other side by Constantine. And all the people stood up and cheered for him on that side too, because everybody knew Jimmy around the area. Later on in life, he did receive an honorary diploma from Marcellus High School. They said that was the biggest crowd they had because they knew that he was getting a diploma. Everybody was there to see him, and everybody shook his hand, and it was really cool. The town really came to be behind Jimmy. He used to work for the farmers, also baling hay and different things. And when he was 25 years old, they were baling hay, and it was really hot out. He never talked. Nobody had ever heard him talk or anything. One day they asked him if he wanted some pop or some water and, something to drink, and he said pop. And that was his first words, was pop. Mrs. Gooding, she used to cut his hair and help him with shaving and stuff and clean him up a little bit before he went to town all the time. The second and fourth Wednesday of every month, they have a kitty cat club meeting, which he didn't know how to say it right, but it's a Lions Club meeting. And he would always go to town a couple hours earlier because he can't tell time or read, but he would go to town and go to the place where they were having their supper and meeting at. And he'd help set everything up, get all the flags set up for them and stuff. And he was a member of that. When they made a motion or something, they always looked at him, and he would always second the motion. He could say second. And so he would second the motion all the time, and it worked out really good for him and the Lions Club. When they have their chicken dinner, he usually has a big sign that he walks up and down the street and promoting the chicken dinner. He does white canes, and a lot of the people will go to him to get the white canes instead of the other members because Jimmy is Jimmy. Then he has done other work with them, like doing ramps for the handicap. We'll take a project on to build a ramp, and he's always there to haul the wood back and forth and get things for the guys, and he works hard at whatever he does. A big thing in Jimmy's life was the Kintz farms. He worked for Kintz down on the farm, and they a lot of vegetables and honey. They had fishing worms there, and so Jimmy does a lot of fishing, and he would usually get fishing worms a lot of times too from Kent's. So they're still there. They still have the raw honey and all the vegetables and stuff. He goes down there. Mr. Kent's and Jimmy's birthdays are on the same day, so it's kind of special too. And he used to take a tent down there and camp out, and then work on the farm and just stay in that tent for maybe a couple days, and then he'd go home. Mr. Kent was always taking care of him all the time, just like the cozy cupboard, when they would always feed him and stuff. He would go down there if they had a bench out in front of the restaurant that was Jimmy's bench where he would sit all the time. Also, he belonged to the United Methodist Church in Marcellus, and he can't really tell time or anything. So in the mornings, when we were up there, we had a camper right in front of his house there at the campground. So every Sunday morning, we could hear him out there feeding his rabbit. Once it got daylight, he was off on his bike to town. Town is about 2.5 miles away. He'd be on his way to town. At that time, they weren't open or anything, but he would go and sit on the steps till somebody came and opened up the church. If it was raining or something, there would be people that would pick him up for church and bring him home. He went to church every Sunday. He never missed. Teresa is his guardian that owns the campground where he lives. She took guardianship over him about 25 years ago because he wasn't being treated well by a couple of his relatives. And so she took guardianship and brought him down, and they put him in a park model, and he's got the lake right out there, about a 50-acre fishing lake. He goes fishing all the time, and he can ride to town. He can be there. It's 2.5 miles away. Mel and I would go to the races on Friday nights. We would come home and while we were still working and grab everything and head up there and set up our camper. And by 6 o'clock, we were at the racetracks to eat. So for his birthday one year, we made up a card and we put in there that we would take him to the stock car races. He just loved going to the stock car races. So we took him to the stock car races, and he was so tickled pink that he wanted to get us a thank you card. Well, Jimmy can't write, but he got us this thank you card, and he turned around and Teresa would write out what he wanted to say. So this was his thing, to say thank you for taking him to the stock car race, and he drew a little stock car down there and a thank you note for us. And it's similar to when they wrote this book. It was about 10 years ago. He also signed it. It took him quite a while to get Jim down there to learn how to spell Jim, but he done a house because we're right next door to him. And, we always had him over for coffee all the time. Every morning, Jimmy would get up and he would come down, and the first one to open the door up, Jimmy would come and get a cup of coffee with us. Well, he never drank coffee. He ate a cup of coffee. That's how he always says, I ate one here and ate one there. But he would get a cup with us, and then he would go over to Judy's and get a cup with them. Because he couldn't say our names. We were them. One time, Mel sprayed me with some water, and I got wet. And Jimmy started laughing. And I says, Jimmy, that ain't funny. And the more I told him it wasn't funny and told him to quit laughing, he laughed harder and harder till he had tears in his eyes. And then he went over to Judy's that day and says, them nuts over there. But we always got him laughing and had fun with him. One time we went fishing together, and I took him out trolling for crappies. And we would catch nice 12, 13-inch crappies in the lake there. Took 2 poles out, and I got Jimmy. I threw Jimmy's pole out and handed it to him, and I started to untangle mine and turn around, and he says, I got one. So I would quit untangling it, and I'd get the net. We'd get fish, out. He ended up having 4 fish before I got a pole in the water. By the end of the day, I think we had like 8 or 9 fish, and I got 2 and Jimmy got all the rest. So now every time I see him, Jimmy comes up to me and grabs my arm and hugs me and he says, I got one, I got one. And he giggles and laughs. He's really a special guy. I was looking for a picture of him with his 2 goats. He sent us a Christmas card with his 2 goats. Since we left the campground, that closed down about 4 or 5 years ago, Teresa and him went out and got 2 little pygmy goats, and he named them Bean and Tater. Tater and Bean. And so he wouldn't be so lonesome around the campground. He gets them, takes them, and walks them around the campground and stuff. And he also has chickens now, and he sells eggs too. So that's something to keep him busy. When they did have the signing of his book and everything, it's Once Upon a Small Town. They had a picture of him with his book there when he done a book signing all day, and there was people lined up all the way outside to the sidewalk just to get at one of his books. It's very special. This Once Upon a Small Town, this is really a kind of like a witnessing that a small town that comes together and makes sure that he is okay and he is part of their community. They had a bluegill frolic festival, and they always have a parade, and they put him as the grand marshal one year on the lead car and everything. He was grand marshal, which was pretty neat. At the fire department, they usually have a pancake breakfast. He goes down there and usually they never charge him for it, get a free pancake breakfast, but he's there to greet everybody. He's like their greeter. It's just like the whole town has come together, made him a special person. If you meet him and get to talk to him, he hasn't got a very big vocabulary, but he will end up making you feel like a special person too, because he's that type of guy. I do have a quick vocabulary thing here. Like $1 is big one, $5 is big one, $10 is big one, $20 bill is really big one. Anything red, the red ones are like strawberries and tomatoes. The wood, like firewood, is a stick. Anything mechanical like a bar, bike, or a car is the thing. Mel and I used to be thems, and Teresa is a her. And I'll tell you a little story about that. Baseball team is the Birds. When he goes fishing, it's shishin'. It's not fishing. Mel asked him one time what he said, and he says, I went out and caught a cat shish. She couldn't understand, didn't know what it was, a cat shish. So when a hot dog is done in his microwave, it goes splod, splod, splod. So his friends in town is pals. All of them are pals. Junior varsity team is the little ones, and the varsity team is the big ones. Kalamazoo is the big town. Marcellus is just Celis. Santa Claus is the red man. Students at the schools are the kids. If you ask him what he wants to eat, I'm not picky. Those are some of his vocabulary. One time, Teresa was trying to get him to learn how to say her name. And so she pointed at a tree and she says, tree, sa. And so he kept going, tree, sa. So the next morning he came out and Teresa says, what is my name? And he was scratching his head and she pointed at the tree. He says, stick. And she turned around and says, you can just call me her like you have been, because she didn't want to be called Stick. He's just somebody special. I've known him for a long time. We seen him last week. He's just somebody that everybody should have somebody like that know him, and how they came together to be around him and take care of him, make him part of their community, and just feels like he's one of the group. He's very special. All right, and that's it for midweek meditation, and we'll see you in the spring, because we've only got 2 more weeks left. And God bless everybody. Thank you.